What is up? It's Hobbyist first. I just finished up this custom orc Blitza-Bommer for Blood Axes. It's a sneaky stealth fighter. I built it using 3D printed components and then good old plastic card and green stuff. I painted up a unit of Blood Axe Commandos for a commission client last summer, and he followed up and asked if I could create a Orc Blitza-Bomber based off of an F-117 stealth fighter, because blood axes are sneaky, and what's more sneaky than a stealth aircraft? We had discussed using existing model kits to do this, and my initial search showed that, like most aircraft, they were only going to be available in 1/48 or 1/72 scale, and because 40K stuff tucks in somewhere around 1/60th scale, I started to look at 3D print options, and it became clear that I wasn't going to get a super detailed thing and create an orky version of it, but rather I wanted just the silhouette of the stealth aircraft, and I wanted to cover it in bits like I do in all of my other orc vehicle builds. And this started out with an FDM print. The STL file, which you can see the orange here, is the base of the conversion, and that came from Thingiverse. And I do like to give credit to artists whenever possible, but unfortunately I don't have the name of the creator of this file. But the the file was able to be scaled and printed on FDM, and then I needed to find weapons for it. Blitza-Bomber has a pair of guns, and then it has an additional gun and 2 bombs per the rules. And I went on to Colts 3D and Thingiverse to search for parts that would work well for this, and I found these Gatling guns that were available in a slightly different proportion. So when I was in the slicing software, I stretched them along this axis to make the guns a little bit longer. So, you know, everything was proportionally stretched. Some of the bands got wider, but, you know, you'd never know the original scale was something shorter. And this engine, similarly, I think the engine which was made for Gaslands vehicles, or for converting die-cast cars into Gaslands vehicles, I was able to find this in my search for engines, and the engine looked like it had the right detail, and I was able to rescale and modify that to fit my needs. And the bombs were located and resin printed, and then finally this little gun turret, which represents something that a Gretchen would be controlling. This gun has a tiny hatch and is underneath the cockpit, so I thought that as is, it was a good scale for a Gretchen arm thing. Oh, and I was also trying to figure out how to get the vehicle to connect to a flight stand. So I purchased these flight stands from Amazon and wanted to magnetize, and found somebody had produced STL files for a flight stand socket, and I modified it to be a little bit deeper to give it more of a thickness, so that I could bury a couple magnets in there, and then that magnetizes that onto the stand. Now, going on to the plastic card covering, this model and the aircraft that it's based off of has a lot of interesting facets or surfaces. So the geometry of it was carefully designed and engineered to be stealth and to be not detectable by radar. So as a result, the real world aircraft has a lot of interesting angles and facets to it, and it's a very unique profile. So it was important to orcify that, but also retain the original profile. So I was going to cover it in plastic card and bits, and I went into my bits box where I had some printed parts from Miscast, who produces a lot of terrain bits. So I've got some Greebly hatches here, and these girders, or these trusses, were from his collection as well. And this is a front light from Rhino. These are some old hunter-killer missile tube covers, and is an orc bit to be at the front of this. So the plastic card goes on, and my normal builds of trucks and battle wagons and stuff include cutting out hundreds of tiny rivets, and I'm slicing them off of a styrene rod, and it's a very tedious process. You're fine like a surgeon. You're using two X-Acto knives to dip it into glue and pry it off, and it's a lot of work. And I wasn't against doing that because I think the finished result of that looks really, really cool. But I wanted the jet to look faster and not so clunky. And I also wanted to try my hand at green stuffing some welds. So this is my first attempt at green stuff welds, and I'll be honest, some of them are a little more refined than others. But it was just a matter of rolling out green stuff in some tubes, and then sticking it in with a rubber-headed sculpting tool that was wet, so the green stuff wouldn't stick to it. And then I used the back end of an X-Acto knife to press this weld texture into it. Some other parts that I used here. This is something that I found at the dollar store. These are some garbage bits from my bits box. This is a piece of sprue right here that was cut to look like an exhaust. And here's some exhaust from a model kit, probably the same model kit that sprue bit came from. And some picture hanging wire is used to just orcify the build, so that it looks like they have not thought that the wires have to be internal, and they're just kind of running along the top edge of the kit. And last exotic material, I guess exotic is a little bit much as a term, but I discussed with my client of whether or not to have an exposed cockpit with an orc flyboy visible, or would it look cool and keep the silhouette to put a mesh windscreen over this. And we agreed that keeping the profile was most important, so I found some craft mesh at Hobby Lobby. And a lot of these materials are easily cut with scissors, so the build was not as hard as some of the other ones I've done, even though there's a lot of irregular geometry, and you can see having to get the plastic card to not only have all these non-rectangular shapes, but to conform over these crazy angled facets. Use some angle styrene here for the leading edge of the wings. I thought that was a nice touch there, instead of having that as a flat surface, just to add to the aggressive look of the piece. And there was a discussion of landing gear as well, and I built some kind of strut that came off the bottom, and I was going to put some kind of skids on there, and then a point at the front. And I discussed with the client whether or not that was going to be the right profile. And hopefully you agree that just retaining the silhouette of the jet and having the bombs be the lower and the gun be the lower visible points look the nicest. Looking at the base, the client asked me if I could locate any Gretchen model that had a binoculars or a radio, indicating that they would be calling in an airstrike, and the Blitza-Bommer is flying over them to hit the target. And I went through my own collection and found this guy with a telescope. So he's going to be mounted on this base with an old Imperial Guard Vox and some 3D printed crates. These crates are also from Miscast, and I'm not affiliated with Miscast at all, but I spent $10 a couple years ago on some STL files that include a lot of pieces like this, and crates, and oil drums, and also plates and bits like this. And it was totally worth the $10 that I paid. I'm not sure what they're charging for now, but at the time I spent $10 and I printed hundreds of tiny parts that are awesome to add to foam core buildings and to terrain pieces. And you know, I've got buildings that have stacks of ammo crates in it and stuff, and they're cheap and easy to mass produce on an FDM printer in particular. So yeah, this is the model as it stands, and I wanted to share part one and talk about the build before it was covered in paint. The clients asked for purple, sneaky Blood Axe purple, so that'll be part two, is showing this thing with paint on it and the base all put together. But that's going to be it for now. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you're interested in seeing the rest of this project and you're not already a subscriber to the channel, please hit the subscribe button so you get notifications for when the next video and other videos come out. I do a lot of Army showcase videos as well. So thank you for checking this out. Take care.